Are you or someone that you know in the process of talking to a Muslim man abroad? This might also include a situation where it is actually your family encouraging you to get to know someone from your country of origin or from quote unquote back home. Maybe it's something that you even initiated of your own accord, or maybe you're a revert. And as you're going on your spiritual journey, you're now at a point where you want to find someone as a companion. Whatever your situation might be, in today's video, we'll be exploring the different factors to be aware of, or the red flags to be mindful of when engaging in conversation with a man abroad in a Muslim country or just overseas, and the essential things that you should be mindful of when navigating those conversations. I also want to mention here that in this video, we're not talking down on the idea of meeting someone from abroad, but instead it's just approaching it with vigilance, being discerning of the potential red flags and the unique challenges that this kind of dynamic can bring, especially when we're looking for someone who is a life partner to grow in our deen with and to be our companion through life. Now, I imagine that we probably all know a couple who met in this way and they have a thriving and successful marriage, and so we know that it can work. But we also know, and maybe some of you have even personally experienced, the darker side of marriages that come about in this way. So the point is that it can work. However, in some circumstances, it might not actually be what you think it is and should actually be something that you approach with caution. So with that, let's jump right in. Assalamu alaikum, peace and blessings be upon you. My name is Kashmir and I am a marriage and family therapist based here in the US. I'm also an author and the founder of a private practice mental health clinic called Heal Therapy. I create weekly videos about mental wellness and healthy relationships from an Islamic centric perspective. But please know that this is an inclusive, safe space. So whatever your background or your beliefs, you are absolutely welcome and respected here. And with that, let's jump right in. So before we really dive in and dissect this topic, it's really important for us to note that we live in a remarkable and very unique time in human civilization. It sounds really dramatic, I know, but we have the internet at our fingertips. The digital landscape is rapidly evolving, and now we have such powerful forms of AI capable of doing spectacular and, to be quite frank, some scary things as well. And with all of that playing in the background, the way that people, Muslims and non-Muslims, are meeting people for marriage has drastically shifted over the years. One of those shifts is through social media and, of course, dating and marriage apps too. And because of this, we've become more globally connected and able to communicate with individuals at literally the opposite side of the world to us. So this thread is really valuable for us to understand this topic through, because even though technology can connect, it can also flood you with options, and that can be really difficult to discern truth from falsehood and to know whether or not someone is truly presenting their real self from what you experience in that online encounter. And honestly, it is the wild west out there when it comes to the internet, and so the pendulum can really swing in either direction. So now let's talk about the actual red flags that I wish all Muslimas could be aware of when it comes to navigating that online space, more specifically when it comes to talking to Muslim men abroad, whether it is a Muslim country or any country, so that you, if you fall into this category, can differentiate whether or not it is worthwhile for you to pursue a marriage in this way. So the first important characteristic to look for is the pace at which the individual wants to move towards marriage. When this becomes a red flag is when it moves way too fast. This is when a brother might actually be rushing the process of marriage without any formal introduction to you or to your family. He wants to marry literally within days or weeks of meeting. And as we said, that might also mean without the involvement of your family, without the involvement of friends or community elders. I truly believe that this is a red flag, because anyone who is sincere and is pursuing marriage for the long haul all, they will always prioritize transparency. They will take things at a moderate pace in order for them to learn more about you. And they will never make you feel this pressure of immediacy, like you have to make an urgent decision. They will be patient. And they'll also be abiding by the Islamic rules of courtship, which means that they won't be talking to you in isolation. And if it does begin in that way, then they will quickly try to move in a way where they do have a third person involved in that communication. And if you are the one who actually initiates the discussion around bringing in a chaperone or someone from your family who is a male, a wali, a mahram, and they suddenly ghost you, that is a very clear indication that they did not have healthy intentions in their conversations with you. The second and probably the biggest red flag, I would say, is when the man has an emphasis, or should I say an overemphasis, on immigration or location. If he constantly brings up moving to your country, getting a visa, or starting a better life abroad, it's really important to assess his intentions and be really discerning with that interaction. Now, this is not to say that even if conversations around immigration do come up, that they are not sincere, but it's just important for you to be discerning as you're navigating those conversations, because visas, green cards, papers, all of these things can be a huge motivation, especially for men who live abroad, especially for men who are quote unquote in third world nations, because of the way that they view women who live in the West, simply because of the way that they view life in the West, even though it might not be what they think it is. So if your conversations focus more on immigration or even financial opportunities, I would say that's a huge warning sign. In genuine relationships, those kinds of conversations only come about after there is a mutual trust, after you've both established that there is a feeling of emotional safety, shared value systems, compatibility. Once that has been established, then conversations around relocation and the rest of it should come into the picture. But if that is at the forefront of your conversations from the very beginning, I would say that's something to be very wary of and to just keep your attention on. Now, moving on to the third red flag, which is that he constantly avoids accountability. As we mentioned before, a sincere man welcomes transparency. He will not operate in secrecy in talking with you without a third person present. But if he is actively avoiding introducing you to his family or to anyone in his community, that is a huge red flag, because it tells you that he wants to operate in this online bubble if that is how you're communicating. But if he's actually genuine, then he will value transparency, especially since Islam encourages clarity and openness when it comes to matters of marriage. And so if he is avoiding that, then that might actually be an indication that he is trying to manipulate you and the situation to establish control or whatever it is that he has on his mind. In many cases, you might actually find that there is this pattern of presence and absence. And so he might be talking quite a lot online one week and then suddenly ghost you another week, and you have no idea what just happened. This could actually be a strategic technique that he could be using to establish emotional control over you. Through that, he's able to control the narrative. Through that, he's also able to avoid scrutiny and, in a way, avoid exposure as well. A good man who is sincere would be very open and very clear, and there would be transparency from the very beginning. That's how you know that the intentions are on par with wanting to get married. But a brother who resists that structure and is constantly ducking and diving to avoid having a third person involved in that conversation, that is a sign that they are not mature, that they are not ready. That is a clear indication that they are not serious about marriage. And even if they think they are, they do not have the integrity or maybe the values that you might be looking for in a serious husband. The fourth red flag is another manipulation technique, and that is love bombing. And we see this within the cycle of abuse. When a brother might be love bombing is when you will hear excessive flattery. You'll also hear him make huge promises and declarations like, "You are the love of my life, you are my destiny," etc. Really dramatic overtones. And hearing this, especially very early on, can be be a huge indication that he is trying to just win your trust and use any attempt to manipulate you into a cycle where you are being groomed in essence. And as we talked about at the very beginning of this video, ChatGPT and AI in general makes this process way more difficult to vet just because it is able to finesse the way that an individual from abroad can have a conversation with someone living in the West. And I don't mean to say that in a bad or negative way, but let's say, for instance, someone living in a foreign country is accustomed to speaking a certain way. They can easily finesse their way and their style of talking so that it aligns with your cultural norm. And so you might think that culturally they're very similar to you, but because they're able to use AI and all of these other crazy apps that are out there right now, they can actually catfish really well. Moving on to a fifth red flag is that he may or may not isolate you from your family or from your friends or from any circle of support. For more information on this, you can actually check out my video on the cycle of abuse and the different phases of it, because one of those does involve isolation. And so just as it happens in the animal kingdom, when a predator is hunting its prey, it will try its best to isolate the prey. And in a similar way, I know it sounds very graphic, predators and individuals who do not have good intentions will groom and isolate their victim in order to make their attack more successful. So if you ever find that there is someone who is telling you not to trust this person, to distance yourself from friends because they're jealous of you, or any of these kinds of tones, then that is a clear indication that they might not have good intentions for your relationship with them. And the final red flag, which is really important to be mindful of, is selective religious application. And what I mean here is that he may use and weaponize Islam to control you. And that might look like him saying things like, you have to obey me, you can't question me, how dare you do that, you're going to hell. All of these kinds of statements. And I've heard this in therapy between couples, clients. Spiritual and religious abuse is a real thing, and it can be used, unfortunately, in relationships as a way of control and manipulation. However, what's worse about this is that this individual might not actually be married to you at this point, and so they're using it as a way of controlling you. And for this one, I would specifically like to talk to reverts here. So if you are a revert and you are new to Islam and you're still learning about the deen, you might actually be more vulnerable and more susceptible to individuals who use this technique. And so this is why I really encourage you to be mindful if there is someone who you are talking to and they use phrases like this. And if you have heard these statements, it might be because he thinks that you know less than he does. Obviously, the truth is that you might know more, that you might actually be way more practicing than he is. But because he thinks that you're new and that you're still learning, that he is able to swoop in and teach you your religion. And I highly encourage you to search out, to study the deen independently and not depend on any one individual to seek and guide you to Islam. And this is why I always encourage reverts to diversify where they're learning their Islam from and to attend classes, because even though it can be beautiful to learn with your partner, they cannot be your only connection to Allah. And they shouldn't be. It should be something that's a lifelong thing that you are committed to, whether or not you are with them. And that was actually the last red flag that I had on this topic. And just to wrap up, if any of this resonated and felt way too familiar for you, and you are finding yourself in a situation where you're not sure about the intentions of someone who you are speaking to right now, I want you to know that you don't have to navigate this alone. If you do need to talk more about this topic and you still feel like you need that clarity, please do not hesitate to reach out to our clinic. We offer free 15-minute consultations for all requests that we receive. All of the information is in the description below. Thank you so much for watching, and inshallah I will see you in the next video. Assalamu alaikum, peace and blessings be upon you.